I have to tell you, I was expecting the worst. I was expecting that we were going to hear that the president had agreed to recognize Russian occupation of Crimea, agree to Russian demands for elections in Ukraine, and things like that. So the fact that we didn't hear those is better than if we had. But we have to be very clear that I think Vladimir Putin has actually zero interest in any true long-term settlement as long as he remains in power, and that his ultimate objective still remains the destruction of Ukraine. So I didn't hear or read anything about Russia backing away from their ultimate objectives. So we should be very clear about this.
So to that end, General, and it's great to have you back here as this news breaks today. If you're a member of the Ukrainian military, if you're a soldier or an airman deployed, you're waking up tomorrow morning to the very same world that you were in today, correct? There's no ceasefire when it comes to military. The battlefield will continue. Donald Trump talked about some of the Ukrainian forces surrounded by Russians, that he was going to spare them. We didn't hear a reference to that in the readout today either. So the fighting continues.
Well, and you know, I'm sitting here. Of course, this is in just the last few minutes, but I'm trying to digest a little bit. What does it mean? You're right. There's nothing that is better for any soldiers on the battlefield. And when we talk about energy and infrastructure, that sounds to me that Russia is acknowledging that Ukraine was hammering their oil and gas infrastructure, and so of course they want that to stop. Now, I'll be curious to see, does that mean that Russia will also stop attacking Ukraine's power generation, for example? I will want to see that if that's really going to happen. And, you know, I think that the fact that when the United States comes out of a call with Putin and says, oh, it's going to be a great relationship, Vladimir Putin is convicted in the International Criminal Court. So he is responsible for the death of tens of thousands of innocent people. So I don't understand how the president of the United States, at least in normal times, would come out and say, we're going to have a great relationship with the Russians.
Well, and especially when we look at the readout we got from the Russian side and what the Kremlin is saying, they specifically make reference to the idea that U.S. aid flow to Ukraine should stop. General, what would happen if the U.S. were agreed to cut things off?
Well, I think there's two or three parts of this. Once again, all the demands, all the things that have to cease or stop are those things that affect Ukraine negatively. I still, to this day, have not heard anything from the administration that says Russia must stop doing X, Y, Z. So I think that's what I think about when I hear what you just pointed out, Kaylee. Now, of course, you know, the other part of this, the hubris of the U.S. administration. Ukraine is not bound to any of this. Europe is not bound to any of this. And so if the United States makes the terrible decision to abandon a democratic country fighting for its survival against Russia, then Ukrainians are not going to stop. And Europe is going to have to fill in the gap. And, you know, I'm here at a conference in Berlin right now. That's exactly what people are talking about, is how they're going to increase deliveries, because this discussion between President Trump and President Putin has been done without meaningful European involvement or even Ukrainian involvement.
Well, with that said, you were commanding general, U.S. Army Europe. What are military leaders in European capitals, our allies in Europe, saying about this today? How worried should they be, whether you're talking to leaders in Poland or Estonia?
Well, first of all, of course, we still have NATO, the most successful alliance in history of the world. Yes, of course, there's problems. There's concerns about American commitment. But the fact is, so much progress has been made since really 2014 to improve capabilities and structures and readiness of different nations. So we're in a better place than we were now, the alliance is, than it was 10 years ago. And particularly, like I'm sure many of your listeners know, Joe, that Germany today, the German parliament passed law that changes their entire budgeting system so that now they will be able to spend hundreds of billions of euro on defense. So this is not the same old Europe from just a few years ago. They will, in fact, be able to provide much of what Ukraine needs over time. And I think we, the United States, we're going to regret having lost real influence in Europe because of that.
General, we just have a minute left here, so I apologize that we have to keep it short. But what would you expect to hear from Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky in reaction to this?
I think that President Zelensky will say nobody wants peace more than Ukraine. This war started when Russia invaded Ukraine. Russia could end it tonight. They could, if people really want peace, they could end it tonight. That's what the Ukrainians want. But the Ukrainians also know that you cannot accept the Russian version of peace because that means total subjugation of Ukrainian people and the destruction of the Ukrainian state.